All right, if I may ask you to sit back down for the last session of the day. Please take your seats. Okay, so we approach now the final presentation, the final session of the day, and actually the final session of the main part of our SDMX Experts Workshop, since, as you know, tomorrow will be dedicated to side meetings and to capacity building. And this last session is dedicated to a topic that has come up in our discussion several times, that is SDMX and microdata. And the session will be chaired by our colleague Bilyana Bogdanova from BIS. And I'm very happy she made it. I was a bit afraid in the morning, not seeing her immediately. Where is she? But she's here. That's what matters. So we are slightly late according to the agenda. I won't take more of your time, and I just hand it over to Bilyana then.
Thank you, Luca, for the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining the final session of the day and of the workshop. As Luca mentioned this afternoon, the focus will be on microdata, which is really a topic of growing importance for official statistics. And we heard that being mentioned a couple of times in the session before. I think you are all aware, and I wouldn't emphasize overly much, the value that microdata brings for the end user, enabling more granular insights and enhancing our ability to tackle complex policy questions. And today, as Luca mentioned, we'll look at the new possibilities provided by SDMX 3.0 and more concretely at microdata in SDMX. Our session will cover microdata modeling and related aspects from a business perspective. We'll discuss the implementation challenges that you may face and explore potential solutions. And at the end, we'll conclude with two practical, it's this one.
This one to go forward, this one
to
go back, yeah.
And I will conclude with two practical use cases that demonstrate how SDMX is being leveraged by colleagues to solve real-world statistical challenges. This work and this session will draw on the work being done on the ongoing work of the cross-working group task force on microdata, which was established in March 2024. And in fact, all the speakers today are active members of this task force. I will provide a very quick overview. The cross-working group aims at promoting and fostering the implementation of SDMX 3.0 for microdata across national and international statistical agencies, while coordinating efforts with other international initiatives, such as the G20 Data Gap Initiative, and Olgert will provide more insights on that in a few minutes. What we aim for is to deliver a new SDMX content-oriented guideline that will offer a comprehensive framework for how SDMX can be used for microdata by statistical agencies. The idea is to complement the existing SDMX documentation from a business-oriented perspective and draw on some of the real-world use cases that are provided by the members. As you can see on the slides, we will be dealing with microdata modeling and related aspects, and there is a subgroup which is led by Olgert and Daniel, who will be giving you some updates in a few minutes on the work already being done. The aim is also, by reviewing the use cases, to identify gaps in tooling and implementation aspects, and there is a second sub-task force which is led by Edgardo. We'll also be elaborating on microdata exchange, storage, and importantly, interoperability, a topic that was also mentioned in the previous session quite often, and as well on existing practices and use cases. The group has 24 members from 7 international organizations, 4 central banks, 3 national statistical offices, and 1 member associated with the private sector. We have collected so far 13 use cases from 8 organizations, and initial work has already identified some challenges which can be broadly classified into 4 main groups. And here I won't go really into detail because the speakers will elaborate in a lot more detail. But those main challenges are in the area of modeling. There are some technical challenges, as well challenges related to communication. And I think it was mentioned in the session before that there is a clear need to explain at the organizational level and user level the benefits of microdata in SDMX. And as well some lack of best practices. And also some strategic considerations. One example is the micro and macro integration, but also interoperability and complementarity with other standards. So before we dive into the session and gain more insights, I will start by briefly introducing the speakers. They will present each, and at the end of each presentation, you will have time for Q&A, and as well Q&A addressed to all speakers at the end of the session. The first speaker of today is Olger Unger. Olger is a senior economist statistician at the Data Office of the European Central Bank, where he leads efforts to ensure that as ECB projects implement efficient metadata management practices and follow the ECB data management framework. He has a background in finance with over 15 years of experience in central banking, focusing on statistical and supervisory microdata. He has contributed to international standards, XBRL, LEI, the list is long. I stop here and give the floor to Olger. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I'm also not really SDMX guy and person, so it's the first time I speak in this audience. And also the topic is not really SDMX, because I talk about the Data Gaps Initiative. We are now in phase 3, and I talk about the recommendation 14. During the lunch break, I saw that some people didn't really know these acronyms, so just a brief summary of what it is. So the Data Gaps Initiative was created basically after the global financial crisis in 2008, because the regulators realized that there are data gaps happening, and during 3 phases, which luckily I was involved in all of them, we tried to close different kinds of gaps. So it started with cross-country exposures, then it moved into phase 2, which started around 2016, and into shadow banking was a big focus. And now in phase 3, the focus is to address emerging data challenges. So this is now coming up, as you are aware. Climate change is one of them, digitalization with fintech and all these kind of startups in this area. But of course, as well on strengthening the financial stability of the previous phases that were going on. So recommendation 14 is also the last, there are 14 recommendations in this phase 3, and recommendation 14 shall improve the data sharing between international organizations, between national statistical institutes, between national central banks, and so on. So my presentation has 3 parts. So first of all, well, what was the scope of recommendation 14? What are the results? And then what are the next steps happening in this kind of aspect? There are some slides that I will skip because we are behind anyways, and I realized maybe they're not too interesting, but you have all the slides on the website. So first of all, what was the scope? So the scope was data access and data sharing, including the possible development of an international microdata standard. And, well, SDMX was one of the standards that we had a deeper look in, because we should consider existing standards that are out there. So we looked in SDMX, XBRL, DDI, and so on. and tried to figure out, can we use any of them? Do we need a new one? Well, this is coming up in this presentation, the outcome of our work. And we should also take into consideration existing developments that are happening. So, for example, in Inexta, I spoke with some of you today that are actually members of the Inexta network. And also we had to align with the recommendation 13, which was working mainly on the access to private and administrative data. The next one I actually skip because it's not so interesting. So the organization, how was the recommendation 14 done? Eurostat and ECB were the leads. Together also with Bundesbank that joined us then. We're around 80 people from 22 countries, 6 international organizations. Well, fully online because it's, we try to save the environment as well, and it was not needed to meet from different time zones that are around there. But the important part here on this the slide is that we split up in 3 different subgroups. Yeah? One, the subgroup was the principles of data sharing. One was the standards itself, to look out which standard is out there. And the third one was an option for self-commitment. And the results I will present exactly in the same structure of the subgroups. That's why I will skip also these. Okay, maybe. So there was a difference between recommendation 13, and we were focusing in recommendation 14 really between the public organizations and the data sharing with other interested parties with it. So it's not between the data sources and public organizations, but it's really to the outside. Yeah. Okay. So the results. First of all, principles of data sharing. So the result was to create principles. There were 14 principles, which are shown on the next slide. And of course, because the focus of this phase 3 of the Data Gaps Initiative was climate change, so that therefore the focus was creating principles that help share data in climate change, household income and wealth, and in the fintech and financial inclusion. However, the result of it you can just use for any kind of data sharing because the principles are relatively high level, and for statisticians that are maybe in this room, they will look very familiar. So who was the recipient of this recommendation? So who can use it? Well, it's many of you are here in this room. It's organizations publishing statistics like National Statistical Institutes, national central banks, public administrations. But also we realized that regional governments are one of the, in some countries that they are sharing official statistics, so they are also part of it. And of course, international organizations. Second, anyone that is interested in sharing their data with, well, the organizations just mentioned before. And third, all other entities that want to share data for scientific purposes. So as mentioned, some of them look pretty straightforward. So behind each of these principles, they are still being worked on it, so they will be published on the Data Gaps Initiative website. But behind each of these principles, there's basically like 1, 2, 3 paragraphs explaining what it means. They seem quite straightforward for many of you here, but you have to think that these principles also are for emerging and developing countries which maybe don't have so much experience in sharing data with the public, with researchers. And therefore, like transparency, accountability, legal basis, purpose, I mean, they're straightforward for us, but maybe for other jurisdictions, they're not so clear. And then, Then standards for data sharing. So this is where I was the lead, and that's why I'm here today, together with Daniel Sorani, who speaks then after me. And this was probably the reason why we are now in this cross-working group task force, because we were working on this. So what we created was a document where we are comparing the most common standards according to some criteria that are making it possible to compare the standards for data sharing. And we tried really to look at the pros and cons for the different standards that are out there. So the standards that we had a look were SDMX, XBRL, ISO 20022, and the DDI. And we tried to not to propose one of the standards to everybody, but actually say, because for some jurisdictions it might be easier to implement SDMX, for some XBRL, for some maybe something completely else. So we just try to elaborate on the pros and cons that are out there. yeah, and the objective was to help organizations, be it NSIs, NCBs, and so on, to use this document to make a decision for themselves which standard they're going forward. However, also because the idea is that potentially we end up with multiple standards, that there should be some interoperability between standards, allowing to share and use 2 or 3 different standards that there are. Yes, yeah, we can skip that as well. Well, what we how we compared them, so the attributes. So it was the scope. So first of all, what standard does cover what kind of data? SDMX is clear. XBRL is mainly used in the financial industry for accounting data. We compare technical features and the adoption rate and community support because, of course, costs were one of the ideas that we had in mind because SDMX is relatively cheap in our result to implement, and there is also a lot of open source information. Maybe XBRL is a little bit more difficult to implement, including the software packages that are out there, because there's not so much public available free support. So there were in total, I think, 12 different characteristics that we compared. Yeah. And then, well, we came up with a strong favorite of us, which was SDMX. However, as mentioned, each jurisdiction can decide for themselves. And, well, I don't have to really say about the pros of SDMX here in this audience. So I go to the next one. Yes, cross-standard interoperability. Yeah, I mentioned this a little bit. So it was important also to make sure that the different standards are interoperable with each other, and therefore we looked what's going on there. And well, SDMX and DDI has a working group that tries to integrate the standards, and probably you're aware as well that SDMX and XBRL has some technical working group going on that tries to map it, integrate it with each other. And well, one important thing that was our finding as well of this group was the need for governance, because we are talking here about microdata. For macro, you have SDDS, which is a very nice governance role model. But however, if you plan to use SDMX for microdata, something similar needs to be set up. So that was, I think, the finding of this slide, and also one of the key findings. Yeah. Challenges. Yes. Probably also in this group it's very known, so if you integrate a new standard in your institution, you have to take care of your current infrastructure. But we didn't look when we were creating our results on the technical layer. So are there APIs around there? What are the real costs for implementing? This was all out of scope. It was one level higher because in the future work that will be going on, if there will be work going on in a more deeper layer, this would be then the questions that need to be answered. Yeah. So yeah, challenges. Yeah, you need to balance the cost of implementation. So as mentioned, for some jurisdiction, it might be cheaper to go with one standard that is maybe not the preferable choice of ours. Yeah. So the self-commitment was the last subgroup that we were having. Just keep it, I also tried to keep it compact. The idea was, okay, we have the principles, we have a standard, we need also to somehow monitor the progress of the countries that are implementing it. So under the lead of the Bundesbank, they created 2 surveys, which the idea is to, on a regular basis, to ask all the member countries to monitor and report the implementation status, be it of the principles or of a standard. So we can easily say first, well, which standard are they using, how far are they with the implementation, and also in the further step, the idea was also to have a direct link to a place where all the data is available. So just a link repository. Yeah, there were 2 surveys. I think they're not so important here. Yeah, next steps. So we concluded this work, it was, I think, end of May. There was a global conference where all the senior managers were discussing the report. After this, the comments were allowed. So I have the 3 documents here with me today if somebody is interested in the coffee break. But they are not the final version because the comments were being received and the secretariats are merging not only the comments that were received but also the documents. So there will be one big document created and published, or maybe it's published already, but I didn't find it in the last days. And yeah, I think that's the work done. Maybe it sounds a bit abstract because it's not fully SDMX, but we compared standards, which I think when in our investigation phase we didn't see it that much, that this was done for data sharing, and well, the choices for the countries, how they are deciding to implement which standard for data sharing. Questions now or later?
We can take maybe 1 or 2 questions now. Yes, I see a raised hand. Matt, please.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'd be very interested in seeing the document. Definitely, I mean, because in the technical working group, this is precisely what we're looking at. And actually, you mentioned ISO 20022 and DPM, and in the TWG, we're setting up work packages for SDMX and interoperability with other standards. There's already one for SDMX and DDI. And we're setting up a couple more, and one of them is SDMX with DPM and ISO 20022 with representatives from each of the standards to come together and try and discuss how we create more better interoperability. So yeah, I'll definitely be interested in seeing the outcome of your work.
And we have a coffee.
Yeah.
Thanks. They're not very long documents, by the way, if more people want to join the reading. 15 pages, I think.
So 5 minutes reading break. Okay. Rafael.
Thanks for the great presentation and thanks for the great outcome. Just a question, the surveys which you run then on a regular basis, are they then reported back to senior management? So, for example, when you recommend SDMX, yeah, is there some visibility to senior management? You know, how many countries are then compliant with this, or how is this information prepared?
So it was a proposal at this global conference of the Data Gaps Initiative, and it's most likely going to be implemented, but the implementation cycles are quite long. So we talk here more about 25, 26, the year, yeah, that then they would create, if everything goes to the plan, an overview of the countries where then you can see which country decided for which standards. Yeah, but we have to still work. Because I mentioned these phases of this, we have phase 3, right? It goes till 2026 now, the phase 3. So we most likely will continue the work in some kind of direction, but for me and Daniel, it's ended now. So, yeah, and...
Any other question? Maybe I'll just build upon Rafael's question. You also mentioned self-commitments, so it will work like with other recommendations for the DGI. Each country will make some self-commitments, or you will give them some guidance?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Olgert, and I think we can take more questions at the end of the session. Okay. Our next speaker is Daniel Surani from the ECB. Daniel is a lead data architect in the ECB data office. His main responsibility is to develop and implement a common data architecture for the ECB. I think he's a well-known figure in the SDMX field. He joined more than 10 years ago after joining, as I understand, Eurostat in 2009. He worked as a coordinator for the first ever global DSD on national accounts and was also responsible for its implementation on Eurostat. Daniel is also co-leading with Olgert the subgroup on modeling within the cross-working group on microdata. So we're looking forward to your presentation, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Bilyana. Well, I know a lot of faces here in the audience, and the faces that know me know that I'm sometimes a bit provocative. So I look forward to provoke a bit your thinking in this topic, and also then to have discussions later. I'm also happy to be wrong, but I think it's good to enable our brains a bit especially on the last day of the conference. So what was the first question? Of course, we came together in this joint working group to solve the everlasting mystery of SDMX and microdata that is haunting us since many years. So just we heard already today a few things, and I think we could make the session shorter because Abdullah took away some of our discussion, which is very welcome. So I know that a lot of you are engaged, but maybe just can you give me a few words, a few criteria, just shout it in the room, what do you think microdata is? Just maybe one word, what does it characterize for you? Don't raise your hand, just shout, Edgardo. Statistical units. Individual data. Raw data. Data. I like that most. So what I did, of course, I did a very scientific approach. I asked ChatGPT, actually Microsoft Copilot, can you give me a cloud to characterize what microdata is? So that was the prompt. You can try it in your favorite AI. Can you generate a word cloud of topics related to the definition of microdata? You can look at it later in the slides. Some of the words are a bit small, but almost none of them make any sense. Except in the middle, and even microdata, I got 4 or 5 suggestions, like it's, from DALI, usually you got 4 pictures, and then you choose one or you modify it. In some of them, even microdata was spelled wrong. So I chose the one where this was spelled correctly, but all the rest doesn't make sense. So what did I make out of that? First of all, that it's very bad at generating pictures with text on it. We know that from AI. But the second thing is, what do we do with SDMX and microdata? And we heard some criteria. And for me, my idea, and I expressed it before when I entered the room, my idea is that we don't need to look at that, actually. We don't need to start the work by asking ourselves what microdata is. We need to look at what are the data sets I have and what are the challenges I have to model them. I don't need to categorize them in microdata, macrodata, what green data, blue data, and red data. It's just what are the characteristics of data and what are the answers SDMX gives me. So my provocative conclusion is, with SDMX 3, it doesn't matter anymore, just model data. And if you face a challenge to model data, come to us, or some of you are here, some of you came to us with their use cases, like Bilyana said in the introduction. It's like, I want to have my microdata set, I want to use SDMX, I have problems. And this is what we were collecting. And I will give you a bit of insights now where the problems are. So yeah, the good news is just model your data. The bad news is, where are the problems? We saw a bit of problem of history, we saw problems of terminology, of experience, of guidelines, of examples. So our community was never very strong in looking into this, I would not say microdata anymore, but looking into data sets that look different to our use, like macroeconomic aggregates. The global DSDs were there. We heard they are not so good anymore in the morning, but they're still there. We are very much used to this way of working, but data that is a bit different, we are not so used to. So some details and some of the things we were facing, and I'm not going into the use cases. We have very good documentation about it. We'll talk about it tomorrow again for those of you who are in the working groups, but also for those of you who are not, you can get in touch with us and we can discuss challenges. We're currently collecting them. But what is it? So what I still hear today in our organization, and even sometimes here in the conference, SDMX is for macrodata, don't bother. Go somewhere else. We heard it yesterday. In some cases, it's like, oh, SDMX was not suitable. We go somewhere else. We have too many problems. SDMX is anyway a macro thing, and we don't do it. I heard even still this year, I heard it's a verbose file format. All of you in the room know, okay, we have SDMX CSV. We have the whole databases which contain data. What is important is we have the metadata in place, right? And then the file format is a transport layer, but we saw from Abdullah this morning, it's less and less relevant, the actual exchange. The strength is the modeling, we know that, but these myths are still out there. Or terminology that comes, of course, from SDMX historically, the terminology comes from multidimensional data sets. So I'm talking about a dimension in SDMX, and then somebody will come and say, yeah, I have a transactional data set. It has no dimensions. It just has identifiers. Okay, but in SDMX, in a DSD, you just call it a dimension and it will serve the purpose. But since the word doesn't match, I have no dimensions in my data set. I cannot use SDMX because it requires me to define a dimension. So it's also a bit of education there to say the wording comes from another world, but the data model is actually flexible. Similar with, okay, I have some characteristics, or I have attributes, or I have variables, measures. We have multiple measures now, where we said before in the break, I talked to somebody, he's like, what do you think microdata is? It was like, well, I have a data set with a lot of measures, and SDMX could only do one. It's like, okay, but we're not talking about microdata. We're talking about data sets with multiple measures. Also, macro data sets could have multiple measures. We fixed it, right? So there's a lot of terminology, I think, around where we need to educate, where we need to scale, where we need to show examples. And that's also what we are planning to do. So we have the cross-working group task force, and we have the 2 work streams that Bilyana mentioned. The work stream I'm working on with Olga is looking into the modeling challenges, and you will hear after me, Edgardo will come and talk about implementation gaps. So there is a connection between the two, in a kind of logical connection. The challenges we cannot solve, Edgardo will solve for us, which is super practical, right? All the things I cannot do, with my skills I give to Edgardo, and if you know me and Edgardo, we might have different opinions on things, but usually we solve them together. So also here, what did we do? The classic thing we do in every project, we collect, we analyze, we categorize and group, and then we solve. So we collected use cases, and I forgot the number, but Bilyana has it in her slides. So if you still remember, and if you listened closely, you will know how many use cases from how many organizations we collected. We also merged 1 or 2 of them, so I know at a certain point we had 13 use cases, but we collected them, we analyzed them for the challenges, so we had presentations on each of the use case, where it's like, we asked basically the question, after a bit understanding the background, we asked the question, okay, what in your use case can you not do with SDMX currently? And many of the problems that came back, okay, might be related to SDMX 2.1, might be related to problems in the business process, might be related to other aspects outside of the standard, but at least to understand the complexity. So it's like, where are you stuck, right? And where can we help? And then we have kind of the first wave of analysis that what we have half done now, and we will continue doing tomorrow, is a bit understanding how can we reply to these challenges. So part of that we already saw. So for instance, many cases we got, okay, I have multiple measures. Okay, there's an SDMX3 native implementation. What we need to do is to explain how it works, because it's not so trivial. And this is also going then into the future guidelines, which is the main objective of the task force, to simply explain. And by having concrete use cases from the left side that we have collected, we can explain it with real examples that basically the people participating in the task force can take home the models that we create in the task force and use them, and we can use it directly to explain with concrete examples. So the guidelines will hopefully not look as abstract as some other guidelines do today. There will be some things where SDMX3 answers, but with workarounds. And most of you know what workarounds are. We can have annotations. We can have a bit of like dirty SDMX here and there, where we misuse an artifact, not exactly for its intended purpose, but we can say, okay, we have the thing in the information model, it's there. I'm a great fan of kind of controlled annotations, which is leading a bit to what Matt has mentioned, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, on custom structures, where we say, okay, you have a corner case, you need to cover it. The community maybe does not want to pick it up because it's a corner case, but you can still profit from the SDMX information model, and maybe you have something in a corner that is not fully compliant, but at least you can use all the rest of the SDMX, and you don't need to exit through the door and leave the standard altogether. And then there are things that are not yet there, or they are not there, or there are things that will never be there. I'm not focusing on those because Edgardo has a lot of information about the not yet stuff, and already some, I think, proposals how to make the red box more green, and even maybe sometimes to make the yellow box more green. Not saying we should move everything into SDMX, but we should understand what are valid good use cases where we can invest as a community, and also helps us to prioritize because we have some good use cases backing up maybe some development for future versions. So how do we solve it? If we have a native solution, we explain it, and we need to maybe do a better job to explain with concrete examples, not always with abstract modeling papers. If we have no native solution, we collect best practices and try to explain those, also with concrete examples. And if we don't have it, we give it to Edgardo. Right? So we are here now. So tomorrow we have, for those of you in the room that participate tomorrow in the working group, we will dive into some of the challenges. We will look at some modeling best practices. We have an agenda for tomorrow where we will maybe move the pin a bit to the solve already, at least to understand what can we do in the next steps. So what we will choose 1 or 2 or 3 use cases to cover all the challenges, and we will start modeling them, and we will try to discuss where we get stuck. So what were the concrete challenges? And I have colored them already here. The red ones I didn't put. I didn't want to steal the show of Edgardo for the next slide. But our prime challenges were like, of course, multiple measures. We know we can solve it. We need to do it. We need to see with real DSTs what it looks like and with real data. We have 2 different types of relationship problems. So relationships between concepts, which is mostly attachment levels. There were some things about, okay, how can I make an attribute for a measure? How can I make an attribute for a group of dimensions? These are things that some of it could already be done in 2.1. You could define dimension groups and attach attributes. It was rarely ever used. It was very difficult to understand. Also, maybe the tooling is not optimal. But the standard can solve this now even better. With the multi-measures, we can link attributes to only some of those or only one of them. So this is something we also can explain. One big topic that came also up during IREF is relations between DSTs. So we saw yesterday some kind of entity relationship modeling. I've been working on a paper also for logical data modeling in SDMX, which we have in the pipeline in the statistical working group. But this is something that is not native, that needs annotations, and we need to look into maybe the custom structures or some controlled annotations in the meantime to create this logical data model in a robust way. We can do it, but we need to agree as a community on a best practice how to express it. Arrays multi-value exist now in the standard. The relation to other standards is work we need to do, and it was mentioned before also by Matt. We will look into this task force now to work with DPM and XBRL, mainly from the ECB side. For us, not so much DDI, but this is also a community effort to basically look at how can we connect to other standards. I will not make promises for our guideline in the joint working group, because what we have defined in one of the last meetings was, let's not solve the problem of other standards, but let's draw up some criteria. What are the problems we need to solve? So from SDMX side, for instance, if we want to connect to TPM, we need to be able to understand their information model. We need to create some mappings to ours, and we need to maybe be able to link XBRL to an SDMX metadata backend. So these are kind of the challenges, and then the experts can solve them outside of our working group. We will give the modeling input for that. Then there were some problems on code list governance. Sentimental values is something I think is one of the favorites of Edgardo, so I'm also not going into details, but code list governance and maintenance around it. And then there are some linked to that, some governance aspects like, for instance, better displaying reporting. I know from the unaccredited use case, because I see Arland, it's like, how can we package multiple transmissions into one? How can we model reporting obligations better? How can we model expected data better? So these are things we will look into. So yes, the good news, model your data. There are existing guidelines that will be replaced most probably by the guidelines we work on now, but already now they give you some hints. And David was talking about the decomposition approach, which helps for microdata as well. We heard about the matrix in the course of the conference, which helps to model. And if you get stuck, contact us. We have now a set of use cases we will analyze, but if you come with a completely new problem that we didn't think of, please still come, because we want to have as much scope as possible. So if you look into some draft documentation, what challenges we have currently cataloged, and you don't find yourself in there, then please don't hesitate still to get in touch with one of us to throw your challenge at us, so that we can be, let's say, all-encompassing. Not SDMX for microdata, but like we said in the morning, SDMX for any data. And with that, I give back to Bilyana.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Daniel. I think we have a couple of minutes for questions for Daniel from the audience. You covered everything, Daniel. Abdullah.
Thanks very much, Daniel. Very interesting. I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question, or maybe it should be done at the end, but could you give your views on how DDI and SDMX can work together? How do you see that?
Yeah, to be very honest, maybe we have some people in the room that know DDI better than me, because I looked at it last time maybe 7-8 years ago when I was in Eurostat. In the ECB, we have nothing to do with it, basically, so I stopped following a bit the DDI developments. What I know from that time, but then please correct me if I'm wrong, is okay, DDI has very, very good capabilities for surveys, for archives. This is where it came from. And at that time, we had a lot of, when you looked at GSPPM, there were like nice pictures where it's like, here's SDMX, here's DDI. This is also something I did not always fully believe in. But what from that time I looked at was, okay, let DDI do all this archiving and so on, and description of survey logic is sometimes, for instance, we never looked at in SDMX. I'm not sure if we should. Maybe if there are use cases, we can. But if you have DDI for that and it's robust and it's working, then use it. But then once you have your data, the output of any survey that goes through the DDI process, you can have a DSD for that and then inject it in your data pipelines, in your value chains. So I think that would be where, for me, the natural handover would be between the standards. But maybe there are different ways to...
So the way you say it is not much has changed since SDMX 3.0.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying I did not look into anything in the last 7 years.
Okay, thanks.
But I think we have some people from CBS that I think they work well with DDI. So we need, actually, to answer that question, we need to talk to people that have followed DDI a bit more than me. So yeah.
Maybe just one addition, Daniel, to mention that we have the DDI experts in the cross-working group.
Yeah, we also have them there, yes.
Yeah, perhaps one thing that has changed and could have a positive impact on the work in this microdata group is DDI CDI, cross-domain integration, where kind of DDI is looking how to connect to other standards for cross-integration use cases. That could be, I think, interesting for the work of this group. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I have a provocative question for you, Daniel. You mentioned that there is a change or difference in terminology between the users in the technical user jargon and SDMX. Do you suggest to change the SDMX terminology?
Oh, I don't want to touch the Holy Grail. I learned it since 15 years now. No, I think we need to do a better job simply to show also on the SDMX website real use cases. I mean, we have the global DSDs. The description, for instance, I know because I did them, I worked on this. I think the guidelines for the global DSDs, they are like 10 years old and were never updated. So simply even to understand the models. If we come now up with I think the approach we have chosen now is much more user-directed, where we are saying, okay, we will take some examples from the community that we have collected, we will model those examples, and we will explain the models with the examples along. And then I think people care less if it's called a dimension or an identifier concept or whatever it is. It's simply that this terminology goes along with the real business challenge that is behind. And then people will learn that in SDMX it's called a dimension, even though it doesn't feel natural for them. But if you go to TPM, they have a completely different terminology. I had problems to learn it there because what they call a domain is actually a code list. And I was like, but a domain, for us it's a statistical domain, for them it's only a code list. And I had problems there. But if you're interested to use it, you will learn it. But we can do a job to bring it together with the real use cases. And then I don't think we should change the terminology, because then Matt needs to reprogram FMR and we don't want that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Daniel. Any other questions for Daniel? You can also save them for later. Thanks a lot. Our next presenter is Edgardo Greising. Edgardo joined the International Labour Organization in June 2011 and is the head of the Knowledge Management Solutions Unit at the Department of Statistics. Prior to joining the ILO, he worked at the National Statistics Office and the Ministry of Social Development of Uruguay, as well as consultant to several international organizations in the field of statistical data processing and information systems. He participates in several committees, working groups on the modernization of official statistics, as well represents the ILO at the UN Geospatial Network. He has chaired the SDMX Technical Working Group for 2 past terms, correct? correct, and is now the ILO representative in the SDMX Secretariat. We're also very happy that Edgardo is the lead on the work stream on implementation gaps, and he will now give you some insights in the work being done there. Over to you, Edgardo.
Thank you, Bilyana. Yeah, we did a lot of work in the TWG until they realized, and we passed the honor to Matt, and that really is making things going. So, well, Daniel already explained that we had a second subgroup or task force or whatever that basically were listening to their analysis and try to take those that cannot be solved with the state of the art, let's say, even with the imaginative workarounds from Daniel, and then try to collect that as gaps in, or potential gaps in the standard, that with the idea of preparing a report that could be taken by the statistical and technical working group for eventually future improvements of the standard. The idea of this presentation is to present some of them, I think 6 or 7, because of course I took the more relevant one on benefit of time. And also we will have a Slido question, a Slido poll after each gap presented, because this is a meeting of experts. So the idea is to get some insights on your agreement about how relevant this, first of all, if you consider this is a gap or not, and second, on how relevant it is, and eventually also to collect some better ideas. And last but not least, this disclaimer is very important because I want to be killed by any member of any of the working groups. So these are the proposals that you will see are just ideas to try to explain the use case or the gap, but by no means is something that we have to be taken for granted will be the solution. That would be part of the work of the TWG or SWG intern. So all the gaps have been identified in the analysis of real use cases, and one interesting one, especially in the world of microdata, has to do with the ability or the need for researchers to find out certain topic, certain variable in datasets. I have heard this. Let me tell you something. I think that all the use cases or all the gaps that I will present somehow has been mentioned in this meeting, either in questions or in conversations outside the room. But this is something that yesterday came a couple of times. How can I know if which data sets has information about gender? And the fact is today the API provides a lot of tools to query for a concept, but not at the broader scope, let's say. I cannot query easily for all the DSDs that contains a certain concept. That could be a way of answering that query. So, for example, I cannot have this wildcarding for all concepts, and I cannot even use an expression as the argument of the search. Instead of having a certain specific word, I would like to find conc so that I can get concept and concepto if you have different languages, for example, in the concept scheme. And the idea is you can search in an item scheme so you can search a concept in a concept scheme, but you cannot search a concept in DSDs today. And the real information, this kind of information could be in the DSD. So what would be the proposal? Again, an idea to fix the idea is To add to the API, a query syntax to discover all concepts used in any findable artifact which ID matches a certain expression. There could be that last query that doesn't work. So then the idea is to present a first Slido. How do we do that? Or do we do it at the end, Luca?
I think it would be better if we have the Slido.
Okay.
You answer the question, and then we see the results at the end.
Exactly. We are not going to be presenting during the poll, but at the end we will present all the results. As you can see, you have three alternatives to answer whether it is an important gap to solve or just a nice-to-have feature or not important at all. And if you have anything to say, an idea, a comment, or whatever, you have also the opportunity of an open text answer in the same poll. You can tell me, Luca, when we have a... Yeah, let me know when we have a certain critical mass. I think that Abdullah's magical number is 60.
Yeah, it's still going on. It's not stable yet. I think people are typing non-responsive.
Okay. Good.
People voted themselves true false. Why is it going to the remote?
It is also visible to live stream users, but still have 4 participants typing.
Oh, I'm seeing here, 54.
Still try typing. We're at 54.
Okay.
And
54-1, 54-2.
there are still 2 participants typing. Okay. I think we're. I think it's.
I hate not being able to beat Abdullah. Okay, let's go for the next one. The next challenge or next gap is linked datasets. There have been several use cases, more than one, that requires linking different datasets. For example, typical use case, link macro data with microdata, the aggregates with the microdata that generates this. And of course, there is a challenge, added challenge there, that is the anonymization. Then, a typical use case from the social statistics, socioeconomic statistics, is the data collected in surveys for hierarchical entities. Any household survey, any population census has data about household and individual that lives in the household. These two records, or these two records have different layouts. And of course that they are connected. Data in separate linked datasets flag according to this variability for more efficient transmission. This is a use case from Anacredit that was explained by Antonio, that they have an application where they recognize that different datasets has, or variables organized in different datasets has different level of variability, so that they don't have to transmit all the information all the time. Something similar to the fact that we have in SDMX referential metadata in the DSD and referential metadata in the MSD. One travels with the data, the other is optional and can be queried on demand. Well, here is something like this. And the last case is define, also from Anacredit, a set of data sets that has different layout, different model, and has to be transmitted together. And among them also, there is a certain data set that contains general information, general metadata that could be considered a kind of header for the group. So all are different use cases, but at the end we are all talking about the same thing, that is having the ability of mixing or relating together a set of DSDs. And the proposal would be, okay, thinking of what we have today, being able that a single data flow may link to several DSDs that should have probably common dimensions, like foreign keys in a relational model. That could be a requirement. But at the same time, each DSD defines an individual data set. So, I mean, there might be another data flow pointing to each individual DSD and have a different access. Again, it's the same Slido, so you will have a new survey. Doesn't show up?
Oh, sorry. It should be fine. Sorry, it should be fine.
Okay. Okay. 59. 60. Okay. Next. Composition rules. This is something I think quite easy, but there was a couple of use cases asking for a solution to manage aggregations and formulas for easy validation. For example, total income to be derived from its components following a certain defined formula. And I understand that there are two different cases here to observe. One is when the components can be associated, for example, to items in a code list or an item scheme. And other cases when components are constants, that in that case would be a constant scheme. But at the end, we are talking about item schemes, and this is what I want to highlight. And another fact is that today, we can see a lot of even global code lists that contains aggregation rules in the description. If you go to the national accounts, global DSD, there are aggregation rules for European countries, the different EU. It explains what are the composition. And there are other cases where people use the description field to store aggregation rules. So that gives me the idea that this is an old requirement that for some reason is not solved properly. Another example is, for example, to calculate the household income based on the sum of individual income of household members in a survey. What's the difference between that and the previous case? That, for example, in the previous case, we can have all the concepts as multiple measures in the same observation. Here, we are talking about different observations because we are talking about the household observation and the individual's observation. And thinking of the linking datasets case, we can even be thinking of different datasets. So My humble opinion, this is more a calculation to be handled with VTL, because otherwise I think we are stepping onto Angelo's field, and I don't want to have any problem with Italians, just in case. I have to show my passport, just in case. But proposal or whatever, what food for thought? Add composition property in item schemes to store aggregation rules. At least just to fix this issue of this fact that there are composition rules today in the description property, and let the other aggregation to be handled with VTL, and eventually stored in the registry as transformation schemes. That is the way of storing transformation or PTL rules in SDMX. Again, the same process. Okay. Good. Another usual suspect. We have been talking about that even at the Secretariat and the Sponsors Committee, the interoperability, the link to other standards. So it appeared also, of course, in the use cases analyzed, how to describe summary statistics associated to variables, how to link to questions, how to link to external objects, how to link to questions. Let me explain it. For example, again, if you have a survey and the different concepts or variables are response to a certain question in a questionnaire, how to link that, the actual question that resulted in this value. How to link to external objects in general. For example, to DDI description or whatever. Let's take the simplest, DDI codebook, referential metadata expressed in DDI codebook to be linked to a data set that is in SDMX. Of course that I have said that with some colleagues that are experts in DDI, and they're not very happy, but I'm convinced that all description that DDI includes, at least for DDI codebook, and probably for lifecycle, we can put that in MSD, because at the end, an MSD is as flexible as you need, and you can define your own concepts, and you can put there the content. So everything that has to do with description can be done in the MSD, but that is redundant if you already have that in another standard that probably is more suitable for that. Because DDI, again, let's talk about the most simple form or version of DDI. DDI codebook has been done and used to describe data sets, to describe studies, statistical studies, and it's meant for that. So yeah, you can create an MSD and map everything and copy everything, but perhaps it would be more intelligent to link to that information. On the other hand, it's well known, and we have been discussing that also in the last months, that SDMX lacks a semantic layer to describe even well-known entities. Let me take an example from the microdata world, the weight. Every survey has one variable at least, normally more than one, that is the weight for that record. Well, in DDI, you have that element identified as a weight. In SDMX, you will have one variable that says weight year, weight quarterly, weight month, but will be concept that you have to name, and nobody else except you will understand what it is. Probably other people speaking your same language as well, but not a computer program. And there are all other standards out there that are better for modeling certain type of information objects. And I refer to Abdullah's presentation on classifications and everything that we have been talking about, XCOS being in the link open data world, the preferred standard for classification management. So the proposal that in fact is outdated because the TWG is already working on that in particular, is to define a way of linking objects in other standards to be easily integrated, you can remove it, to be integrated by an application consuming SDMX data and metadata. Your opinion, please. Okay. Okay. Okay.
But you can continue.
I can continue? Yes.
I'll take care of the podium.
Okay. So that's an interesting one in my perspective. It appears in the use case that we want to listen after the break, that is how to model a business register or master file in SDMX. So the particular use case is that you want to validate certain identifier, for example, but not against a code list, but you want to validate it against a live business register or master file. And of course that this is a file that probably is shared with other systems, but usually it's a huge database. I don't know, a registry of whatever, a frame of whatever. So the problem is that, yes, you can eventually perhaps map to an item scheme. I don't know. I'm not very expert in using representation maps or the new types. Perhaps you can do something like it and generate your internal code list in order to use as a lookup table for validation. I don't know how it goes with the dynamic, because the difficulty is that this register is dynamic. So you will have new data coming, another being deleted, and you cannot prevent that. And the other point is that if you want to use or you want to refer to the actual business register, you have to define a layout that is much more complex than a code list, of course. So the idea, or what we would need, would be use a data set defined by a DSD to be used as the enumeration for a concept. Instead of having a code list like we have today, or a concept scheme that we can have in some cases, like the famous measure dimension. But the idea is, why not to enumerate or represent a concept by the identifiers of another data set defined by a DSD. Your turn. I see not very friendly face in math to my person, but I don't put the priorities. I just throw ideas. It looks like people is writing a lot, no? Hope that not something about my person. It's okay to go? Okay. Last one, and this is quite obvious, but is something to expect when dealing with microdata. Especially if we think of applying microdata to socioeconomic surveys, you may have several gigabits in a data set. You will have thousands of records. Imagine a population census. One record, one observation per individual plus one observation per household. Depending on in my country it's not a problem, but in some countries that could be a huge problem. So the point is that, just to start with, how to deal with queries for this type of microdata set, without going to the case of the census that could be a corner case. But in general, microdata sets will be much more bigger than aggregate data sets. And of course that if you just query and keep your browser with the session open waiting for the result, you will have a timeout just to start with. So despite other data set formats that we will need probably to hold this microdata, also we will need some improvements in the API, for example, to be able to have asynchronous queries whenever you expect big responses. And other things, of course, other related features that I don't even know, but people that knows much more than me about the REST API will probably consider when looking at this fact. So my idea with that was basically to install the foreseen issue of the size of the microdata sets and how to deal with them. Last poll. Oops. Luca does not agree with that, so he has the power. Okay. So basically that's all from my side. The idea, yes, of course, now the idea is to get questions, but also bright ideas. And also, I don't know if before or after we're going to look at the results of the different questions.
Some people still voting. Let's have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Okay, I see already a raised hand, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Edgardo, for all these challenging questions. Just to extend to the last one, which is about getting data. But what about uploading data, so submission of data of very big data sets? Maybe we also need something asynchronous here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not something that was presented as a use case, but of course, this is the type of things I was referring to when I said that it's not just about this particular feature that was presented and everything around the big size files that will be coming to the standard with this new management or data management of microdata. Of course, yes, it's the same. But we still need also a standard for data submission, synchronous. but yeah, it's Angelo.
Thank you, Edgardo, for the presentation and for the provocations. I don't want to fight with you. You are much bigger than me, so. Just to accuse myself for the two no's that I'm already answered. The first one is related to composite rules. In VTL, we have a rule set, and so that's both of the use cases that you have depicted can be solved in VTL already with the current operators. That's one answer. The second one was related to the master data or reference data or whatever. The way we do, and also in VTL if possible, is just model them, and with VTL and with the SDMX 3.1 or 3.0, it's just possible because usually master data has one intensifier and many measures, so it's native, just already with 3.0, and then we can just join, and that's the way that we do in Banca d'Italia. So without having another construction in DSD, you can just point them and model them as another DSD, also virtual one, and you can just join for enrichment or for validating.
Yeah, but the advantage is that you are already linking to other standards or to other data formats. But the problem is that you don't have this master file in a DSD. You have it in your VTL DSD, let's say.
If you want, you can model them in a DSD, but it's optional.
Yeah, but yeah, of course. But then you have the join that in SDMX the join would be the enumeration. Be careful what you ask. He worked with me.
Yes. Okay. I'll be very careful. No. This I put the questions in the poll, but you can ignore that question. But I will ask here that it's in addition to what Jens says. When you're dealing with this type of large data set, I have a question, but it's in a opposite way. Like today, we already encounter this huge data set or database, and we have no way to blocking queries. So I'm just thinking maybe in some case, like for these microdata that you may just want to do the data modelings and to set up your structures, that is there a way to block a query? For data upload, you can do in batch or that it not comes all the way. But for data queries, if you're not careful and you allow this type of queries, we're going to reach the physical limit of bandwidth, whatever the volumes, and there has to be a way to prevent this happen, almost like an attack.
Matt or Xavier, it's a call for you.
Hi. Yeah, so for the last one, for me, should also cover not just big, large volumes, but the first time that I read the acronym of SDMX, I got stuck with the exchange, and now seeing everyone going to microservices, for me, this should also cover the machine-to-machine use case, because for me, the formats that we have, they're more meant for web rather than machine-to-machine communication. So I think we can tackle both.
Yes.
Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe actually just to complement what was mentioned about the large data queries. I was also wondering the same recently about the availability API, right, and how much sense that makes for microdata when you actually get all the distinct values, and whether that needs to be thought about a little bit. And just one kind of question. There's an artifact in SDMX that no one really uses, and it's called the reporting taxonomy. And is that something which can be used to, because that's meant for packaging data flows together, right? Or not? Was that considered?
Packaging data in what?
Well, reporting taxonomy is a bit like a category scheme, but you can actually link it to, you link each reporting category to a set of data flows. For the purpose. Am I the only one that knows about this artifact? Nobody's ever used it. And I mean, has anybody used it?
For microdata, the best I can think of is to segment the data by certain criteria, and usually it's geographical. So the typical use case, at least in survey and census processing, is to have a control break based on geographical identifiers that are usually part of the generic identifier. So you usually, the typical results of a census is by the major administrative division, and then by secondary administrative division, and whatever. So by province, town, county, whatever is the name in your country. So this is a typical segmentation of the data, but it's usually done by processing the whole data set and making control breaks at each ID. But I don't think that you can categorize the data. I don't know. Maybe people with more experience in...
I think it's an artifact that nobody's ever used, so I don't know. Maybe it's a candidate for...
You have to explain to me tonight, because I have to use it tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, Camille.
Yes, thank you. So before responding or take the, I try to ask also ChatGPT what is the kind of solution that we can give. And based on what I know with limited knowledge and also hear the response, I think the solution is more linked to technologies that should be coupled with SDMX more than SDMX itself. Like, for example, compression, here streaming protocols. I'm talking about the last point, which is the big volume of microdata. And mainly another use case, maybe can be arised is the census. Because now in Africa, we have many countries that are conducting census, and maybe they will be interested to model data from the lowest level if they want to go, and then they will have a very large, let's say, cube. So to summarize, I think maybe in terms of technology stack, we have to think about other format like Parquet, I don't know, or technologies use it in big data. In terms of architecture, maybe we have to go to more decentralized or microservices architecture, like if I'm saying, for example, data mesh or something like that, just to overlap this kind of issue. Thank you.
Yeah, I fully agree. For the last use case, it's true. It can be maybe solved with technology, and I want to hear from Xavier as well. But there are other challenges that were presented here that are related to data modeling and to the capacities or the features in the standard to do this modeling rather than the technology. I mean, linking data sets, you can do it in any relational database, but you cannot model it easily in SDMX. Xavier, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's just complementing what Kamel was saying. Basically, there is the issue of formats. I mean, if you go to the big data stack, there is a reason why they don't use XML, they don't use JSON, they don't use CSV. They have ad hoc formats to support this big data use case. And I don't think it's really a matter of whether the API should be synchronous or asynchronous. I think this is more like a pattern of how to do things, and I think it's useful both for small data or big data, depending on basically the way you want to interact. But if you think, for example, about I think it's the standard on the big data stack, which is based on Arrow, and it's called Arrow Flight, and this is basically the service that you can use to extract data from, let's say, an HDFS cluster. Just to give an example, it's not asynchronous. It's synchronous, but it's based then on gRPC under the hood, which again is more efficient than REST. So I don't think that it should so much be on synchronous versus asynchronous, but more, let's say, on formats, and then maybe, as was already proposed by Pedro a while ago, whether gRPC should not be worth our attention. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. I knew I would learn a lot. Okay, let's see the results.
Okay, so first question, results.
Okay.
Should we go directly to the comments as well? Okay. There was also a question about this in the Q&A. I saw someone, I think it was about this feature.
I was already answered one.
You were already...
No, I did not. Somebody answered, so...
Okay.
But I agree with the answer.
Okay.
We're linking there.
Anyway. The score, yes. Okay. There we go.
Yeah.
I have a comment in this one. I feel that we try to put all functionality into a definition of an API, but maybe we should consider splitting the API per purpose, not to deny or some functionality, but there's a concept of BFF, backend for frontend, where you define the API dedicated for the functionality that you want. So for data dissemination, displaying, and so on, we could separate the API, and maybe this makes things clearer for implementers and targeting audiences.
Xavier? You.
No, thank you. Yeah, we discussed it a bit together, right? And I think it's worth an investigation, obviously. But unless I'm mistaken, you were asking for 3 features in your 1 point. So, and it's not Christmas yet, so I think we have to, split them and check them individually.
Again, just to clarify, the proposal is a bad idea of how this should work, mainly for generating these kind of things, but not with the intention of being the solution. The use case is a real use case, and it came from Statistics Canada, that they have a repository of microdata, and this is the most common query of the users. Trying to, and I think that also Eurostat has the same use case you mentioned.
Absolutely, yes.
So the use case exists.
Should we go on to the second question, or?
Yeah.
Linked datasets.
Linked datasets.
More or less same results as before, I would say.
Yeah.
You want to see the answer, the question?
Yes.
The comments?
In the use case, other implementation options. SouthAds. What we possibly use VTF for reference.
Yeah, maybe I had a question for Matt, because there is a suggestion here to group through categorizations, but I was actually quickly looking at the information model. What is the difference really between the reporting taxonomy and the categorization? Because I looked at it quickly and it seemed like a spin-off.
The reporting taxonomy is basically the same as a category scheme.
A category scheme, yeah.
It's got a different name.
Ah, okay, right.
But you can't link the reporting category to anything. It can only be a data flow.
Data flow or DSD, it seems less powerful, less generic than a category scheme.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. What do you want?
Yeah, I think that the idea is to pass all this. If you can send it to me, I will put it.
Yeah, of course, we will put everything here. So here's a composition rule, which is sees a bit less support than the other ones.
Yeah.
It's the first one that has less than 50%.
It's a more silly. Even I put just 9 to 5 myself. So I was not convinced about it.
And I think we have here. Sorry. We have here a couple of comments about VTL, about annotations.
Yeah.
We have one also for hierarchies, which I guess can be used to describe, two about hierarchies, can be used to describe some specific compositions as well.
Yeah.
Quick comment. I don't see that VTL and SDMX are kind of mutually exclusive here. Because the hierarchy at which I proposed, or an item scheme, it could hold operators, whereas VTL could perform the actual calculations. I see nothing wrong with this approach. The SDMX stores metadata, whereas VTL performs calculations.
Yeah, it's clear that the two possibilities exist. The question is where to store this metadata. If it worth having it in SDMX information model, or you let it to BTL information model. The calculation will be done by BTL in any case, or the language of your choice. But the aggregation rule should be put in SDMX. Well, we should have a better place to put that the description of a code list, or a code list item.
workability is...
Okay. Well, if it should be in SDMX, then the idea is to have a better place to store that, because today there is no dedicated placeholder for that kind of information.
Mm-hmm. Then we have the one about the links to other data sets, which
this is a draw.
Is a bit, compared to the other one, there's less people saying outright no, but a similar amount of people who are not necessarily extremely enthusiastic or convinced.
Let me tell you that the sponsors have mandated us to work on that.
Okay.
So
Too bad then.
Just in case.
Depends on
No. I mean, this assembly is sovereign, but the sponsor has a different idea.
Anyway, some comments on the use of standardized annotations for these links. Why DPM? Yes. Okay, we can.
I think that
please.
there's an interesting question there that is
I didn't see it.
Quite generic, and the presentation by David probably will help us later. That this
Standardized annotations.
Standardized annotation be sufficient?
Mm-hmm.
I would remove the here. I would say everywhere where we're using annotations today, because there's a lot of guidance on how to use standard annotations, but sometimes, at least personally, but I think that is a shared feeling, we feel that sometimes it would be better to have it as part of the standard in some cases. But the problem is, where is the
line? Yeah.
The line, exactly.
Next one is about the live database, and here, I mean, the percentages of yes is still quite high, but there's a very high percentage of
no.
Sorry, I misread it. The percentage of yes is the lowest one so far,
yes.
And there's a high percentage of no. So this one seems to be less, and lots of comments.
Yeah, this is the more resistant.
So far, at least.
So far.
Talks about a virtual code list. Someone saying that you could just maybe have set up a process to automatically update your code list, I guess, in your registry from the original source every once in a while. Worries about complexities. The identifier is not in the DSD concept. Okay. Maybe that is defined by an MSD could be considered instead. I don't see it, but
how you verify the identifier against an MSD? Because the use case here is to use that as a lookup table.
Okay.
You look up against the identifier of the metadata set that's in the metadata flow. And at least I don't understand your use case at all, but to me a business register would be like, you know, I have an address, I have an owner, I have whatever, and this is information that's stored nicely in an MSD, and my metadata flow has many, or that's modeled nicely in an MSD, and my metadata flow has many metadata sets, and the identifier of my metadata sets can be the list from which you point at.
The use case, the most typical use case is that you have your registry of enterprises, national, the tax authority registry, and you do a establishment survey, and you want to verify that the identifier of the enterprise that you get in the survey is valid. So if you can have a code list, it's easy. It's by design. But you cannot have the business register in a code list.
Yeah,
so.
Of course you can. Because that's what I mean, you can just have a metadata pipeline that constantly updates the register.
Yeah, which is...
Okay, yes.
It's also not very volatile. And then you use...
No, it is volatile. You have apps, you have additions and divisions every day.
Yeah, but that's fine. You have the minor version, and you do a wildcard reference, and you populate the registry.
I think this was the idea, I guess, behind one of
You
these
propose
comments.
workarounds, I identify gaps.
All right.
That's our role.
And the last one is about the large volume Microdata data sets. Here I think we have the highest percentage of yes. Substantial amount of no as well, compared to the first ones.
Yeah.
And then in terms of comments, not very many. It's a requirement, performance and implementation issue, but the answer would be nice. The problem will not be on the API side, which I guess
that is a comment by Javier.
Yeah.
It's easy to update the API, but then you have to deliver the data.
Yeah, exactly. It was also mentioned as the real underlying issue in some other comments here, I think.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edgardo, and thank you, Luca, for those interesting results. We will continue after a short 30-minute coffee break. Thank you very much.
Because it's always a bit of a struggle with this PC. Something, but it's not here. But easy. Can
Thank you so much.
I'm with you. Good luck, huh? So we're about to start again. I would like to ask you to sit down. We have a couple of presentations to go in this session, plus a final discussion on the topics presented. So, okay. I think we can go.
Thank you, everyone, for joining back. We have 2 more presentations for today, and we will close this session. There will be a short Q&A at the end if you have any questions for the presenters today. We will continue with Mayan and David. As I mentioned earlier, they will present 2 real use cases, one from Bank of Israel, and David will present to us the use of annotations for visualization. So let me shortly introduce Mayan Kellerman. She has been working for the Bank of Israel since 2007. For the past 7 years, she has been the head of the Data Integration and Coordination Unit of the Information and Statistics Department. She's a member of the cross-working group on microdata. Thank you for your contributions. And also a member of the SDMX statistical working group. So the floor is yours, Mayan.
No, I don't, because I'm... maybe. Hello. 1 second.
Ah, yes, I'll take care of it. Sorry about that. Forgot that it would lock. Should be good.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, Bilyana. I'm happy to be here. So I will talk about how we are thinking of using SDMX for the modeling and for the governance and for connecting and integrating microdata domains. Just a second, okay. So the outline of the presentation is, First of all, I will talk about our SDMX macro time series project. This is the overview of the bank's current SDMX implementation. Then I will talk about our new initiative, a new project that deals with microdata, and we call this project Smarter. Then I will talk about, I will explore how we are thinking of using the SDMX for the microdata, and we'll show our first case study. And then I will talk about the expected challenges. Okay, so the SDMX macro time series project. By macro, I mean, of course, aggregated data. The macro time series from all the bank's departments are centralized in one platform, and you can see here the numbers of the series that are already included in this platform. And regarding the metadata, we are implementing the SDMX 2.1, and we are planning to expand within the information model and also to move to the new versions of the model. We implement the SDMX artifacts with the Fusion registry, and using SDMX only for the modeling and not for the exchange at this time, as I have mentioned before. Regarding the BI tools, the dissemination and the calculations, so dashboards, we build them on the basis of the modeling, and we use Tableau internally and Power BI on our website. For the user interface to extract the series, we are using Fusion browser, also within the bank and also on our website. Excel, we have the FXL data and the Power Query. And of course, we enable to extract the data with the API. And for the calculations, we are using the SAS Enterprise Guide. So this is just one slide about a big project. I will not focus on the micro time series project, but it's a really big project. So recently we have started a project that deals with microdata and why we wanted to start such a project. So the motivation is, first of all, the increase in the microdata databases and also in the needs for such granular data. Second, our microdata databases today are managed as data silos, and there is no harmonization and lack in governance. A third reason is the need to accelerate the process of extracting information from the data to support faster decision making. Another motivation is to stop manual works and to reduce mistakes. Furthermore, we understand and recognize the importance of connecting and linking between databases to unlock hidden value and meet diverse needs. And there is complexity in accessing the data. So what we have started to plan and design, of course, with our IT department, is a standardized and integrated microdata platform. And this platform will include 4 concepts. First of all, of course, a unified data language. We want to use SDMX to model both the micro and the macro data, creating a unified data language for consistency and integration. One centralized access hub for internal users. This platform will be only for the internal users. A simple access layer regardless of data collection, storage, or management methods. Governance, we want to define roles and reference metadata, glossary, I will talk about it later, but also a catalog and the access policy. And we want to enable multiple tools for the data analysis, various data approaches tailored to specific user requirements. So how we want to use SDMX for this project, for the microdata, for the information model, for the modeling, governance, and integration, and now I will explore each of them. Okay, regarding the SDMX modeling, so I would explore now the artifacts from the SDMX information model that we think are relevant for microdata. Bigger experts are sitting here in the room, so if I have something incorrect, please tell me. So first of all, we start with the design of a DSD for each database, and those DSDs will include some of the artifacts that I will talk about them now. Multiple measures and attributes that related to measures. We see the need for multiple measures also for the aggregated data. For example, in the aggregated data about securities, we have the nominal value and we have the market value, and we can use multiple measures for instead what we are doing now. And we see the need for it also for the microdata to use multiple measures when we have the same combination of dimensions. And the ability to relate attributes to the measures is also very important to describe and explain the measures. Structure maps, the ability to connect and link between the DSDs with structured maps is also very important because we want to integrate and connect the data domains, and because there might be many DSDs in microdata. Representation maps can be used for the diversity of the sources to define uniform codes and for countries or sectors and so on. A concept role to define hierarchies for the concepts, and hierarchies in general are of course very important because we want to enable to move from the micro data to the macro data and vice versa. The next artifact is the code list extensions, which allows to define a code list as an extension of other code lists, and is useful also for the micro and macro data. And we believe that we will need to use it, for example, if we have a list of companies and a list of funds, and if we will need one list, so we will use code list extensions that will inherit the two lists. With arrays, it's possible to use several codes from a code list instead of defining many combinations. For example, indicating that an observation has more than one status, but not only for this case. Metadata structure definitions, the MSD. We want to use it for the reference metadata. We are checking the SIMS framework for this need. SIMS is single integrated metadata structure. And we plan to build the MSD with metadata attributes to describe the data. And it is clear to us that we will need to use the new options of the API for the sharing of the data. So this was a high-level description of the relevant components that we believe we will need to use. About the governance, first of all, we need to define roles and processes that support governance. In the macro time series project, we defined several roles. We have the metadata manager and the implementation manager. When the metadata manager is responsible for the business in standardization and integration in general, but also for the harmonization of code lists and concepts and other artifacts. And the same will be needed for the microdata data domains. Another cross-functional role is the customer and public relations manager, who is responsible for the implementation of the new methods among the users, and is also very important. So as I mentioned before, we want to design and build a glossary and a reference metadata using, and to implement it with SDMX, of course, by using MSD and concept schemes. And our aim is to enable to query the data by the glossary, by the reference metadata, code lists, and so on. And that is why harmonization and using unified artifacts are very important. Regarding the integration, and when I'm saying integration, I mean connecting and linking between data domains from different economic fields. For example, between entities from different databases for the purpose of addressing diverse needs and to receive additional insights from the data. So how we plan to do it? First of all, only if we have a proper modeling and governance. Then linking these with the structure maps, using the same code lists and other artifacts across these, creating logical connections between the data domains, enabling cross-domain analysis without physical data movement, and linking the data sources to the DSDs according to the metadata. So the modeling, the governance, and the integration, it's all combined and go all together. Now, I would like to share with you our first case. This is our POC, which includes the following microdata databases. The first one is the securities market. It's daily data about securities prices, market value, and so on. The second one is the securities holdings, which this is monthly data about the securities each entity holds. The third one contains foreign exchange derivatives transactions. It's daily transactions in derivatives against the Israeli currency. In the first stage, we will aggregate the daily data for each entity and will not take the transactions because it's too much. And then we have the two registers, the business register for the entities, the master data, and a securities register. And what we want to do is to connect between players in the foreign exchange market and in the securities market. And that means that we need and want to connect between entities and between securities, between the data domains. So what we started to do is we designed the DSD for each data domain. Still not sure about the registers, talked about it in the last presentations. And then after we have the DSDs, the dimensions, the attributes, the measures, we decided about the connections between the DSDs. For example, the securities market data is linked and connected to the securities register with the ISIN number, which is the security ID. And the securities holdings is connected to the business register with the entity ID and to the foreign exchange transactions, and so on. So the current project status, as I mentioned, the DSDs are completed or in progress, it's more correct. We have established connections between the DSDs. Now we are working on verifying and addressing inconsistencies between artifacts within the DSDs and between the DSDs, and focusing on the harmonization of code lists. Working on mapping data sources to the DSDs. Developing comprehensive glossaries in general and reference metadata with the SIMS framework for each data domain. And searching for tools. So the challenges that we think we will face in the implementation of the project, some are general and some are related to the SDMX modeling. Locating tools for the management of the data, of the metadata, for the restrictions, for the access and dissemination to the data, and I don't think there is one tool for everything. The sensitivity of the data, privacy, anonymizations, and access restrictions, the complexity of the microdata databases and the connections between them, performance issues because of the big volume of the data, and the modeling issues, how to best connect the macro data DSDs with the microdata DSDs. Should it be one DSD for the micro and the macro, or two DSDs for each data domain? How to model the master data and the business register, the complexity of the artifacts and the proper understanding how they assist, and governance issues ensuring consistency and alignment of metadata across different data domains is, of course, requires careful planning and management. Thank you.
Any questions for Mayan? Maybe I have a question for you, Mayan. Just one question, promised. What are the main benefits that you seek to extend to users with SDMX implementation?
Okay, so maybe I go back to the motivation for the project. Wow, sorry. Okay, so I think that if we look at the reasons why we started this project, so SDMX can help here in the harmonization and in the governance area, because if we will use the same code list with the same meaning, so it will be more easy to the users to understand, and then there wouldn't be duplicate meanings of codes. And also in the integration field, I've showed you our first use case, and there is a need to integrate and connect data domains, and with SDMX it will be easier. So I think it's the main benefits for the users.
Thank you very much. There is a question over there, Ola, I believe.
Okay, thank you. We saw earlier today in Daniel's presentation, he was asking what microdata is. So in your presentation, and you talk about microdata, what is microdata then for you?
Okay, I have this slide. Okay, here you can see all the 5. Let's talk about the 3 first ones. The databases all include microdata. The securities market, for example, it's each security. So this is the microdata, data about each security. The holdings statistics it's duplicate because it's each entity and each security it holds, and it's a lot of data. And the foreign exchange transactions is even more micro because it's going per transaction. A lot of transactions every day between many entities, many instruments. So this is the kind of microdata that we have in the bank.
So it's not necessarily multiple measures, it's just...
No, on that we have multiple measures. Because if you look here at the market data, for each security, you have a lot of data. Its price, its market value, a lot of data. And it goes on each of them. So it's...
Luca?
I had just a question about your history with using SDMX, because you mentioned that you obviously you focus your presentation on your microdata project, but that you're using also for aggregate data, for macrodata. You mentioned that at the beginning. But in what context are you using SDMX in microdata? Is it for dissemination, for reporting? For what purpose?
Macro is aggregated data.
Aggregated, yes.
Yes, we use it for the modeling and for the harmonization and for dissemination to the users within the bank and also on our website.
Okay, so you never really had, let's say, a reporting use case. You started directly with the aggregate data with modeling and dissemination, and then you're trying to take the modeling approach to the macrodata as well, right?
Yes, and then to expand also for the exchange, but...
Well, no, it's clear, no, because it's, going back to what we were talking about a bit earlier this morning, it's not the typical path of most organizations. Organizations probably enter via the reporting and then they expand. But that's interesting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Luca, you can...
Any other questions? No. Thank you, Mayan. And we will have the last presentation for today by David Baraclow. David is a Smart Data Practices Manager at the OECD, leading the SDMX modeling team that models the OECD's data and metadata structures using SDMX. He has been involved in IT system development for 30 years, most of that time in official statistics. As many of you know in the room, he's the chair of the SDMX Statistical Working Group, which maintains the content-oriented guidelines for SDMX implementation and statistical modeling, and is a member of the Modern Stats Standards Working Group that maintains statistical modernization models for business and technical architecture. Over to you, David.
Okay, thank you. If I could, okay, that's it. Thank you for switching the screen. This presentation on using SDMX annotations to drive the visualization of microdata. The presentation shows how we did it, use it in a generic way in the .stat suite platform. But I think using the same mechanism, it could be implemented in other platforms as well. But we'll get to this. So the use case that comes from the SASCC that actually drives this. There were several aspects. One was the ability to store microdata in the .stat suite core data warehouse. Another was to be able to present microdata in a user-friendly table to the user, to allow drill down from aggregated data, to disaggregated data. I mean, in this case, the two cases that we'll see is to actual microdata, Although Edgardo, I'm sure he's going to be looking quite closely, to see if it is actual microdata. We also need it to work with SDMX 2.1, okay, not be reliant on SDMX 3 because we're not quite there yet in .stat. And as I said, solution should also work for less disaggregated data than microdata. So here I'm going to do what you should never do, and I'm going to do a live demo on a production system, or on 2 production systems actually. But okay, so if this works, So first of all, this is showing the debt transparency database, and here the data shows aggregates of, I think, basically like sovereign debt, where it shows we can drill down from the debt of a country and show the individual transactions which kind of led to that debt, the individual loans. So it's a very small data set, right? We can see it's only 330 data points. The other data set has a lot more. So this is showing the aggregates, and if you're familiar with .stat, you'll see that it's quite a normal-looking table. Apart from we have these like hyperlinks on each cell, and this denotes that it's we can actually drill down through the value to see the underlying microdata. We can see 2 measures per country here, which is the gross debt outstanding and the gross amount of new financing within the time period. So if we scroll down, I think Saudi Arabia has just happens to have quite a few things. So for Saudi Arabia, we'll look at the gross amount of new financing in 2020. So I click on the cell, and then we can see the underlying transactions which led to this aggregation. Okay, so the aggregated values are at the top. I don't know if I can highlight them. No, because I'm just clicking the screen with my finger. But yeah, these are all the lists of transactions which led to this aggregated value. Okay, and of course we can go back to the table, and we can click through, something else. Okay, in this case, there's only one transaction, but you can see that every aggregate cell can lead to the microdata underlying it. That's for debt transparency. So if we have a look at something else, which is the creditor reporting system, one of the largest data sets at the OECD, if not the largest. No, I think it's not quite the largest, maybe second largest. So the creditor reporting system, what this does is it shows for recipient countries, the individual donations, okay, coming from elsewhere in the world, probably other things as well, but that's one part of it that I know and I'll show. So we can see here that the amount of data points in this table is just over 900 million. So if we go to the table, so again we see the list of we see the table with all the cells with the hyperlinks on it, and if I click through to through Montenegro, then we can see a table with all of the donations. During this time period to Montenegro, and we can also show we can also see all of the donors in this time period. So what .stat does, it does some traversal of the hierarchy to find out all of the actual donations from all of the donors for Montenegro. During this time period. And if we scroll along the table, we've got quite a small screen, so we would be better on a big screen, obviously. But we can see, I'll just scroll back. We can see at the top that the combined unit of measure shows that we're looking at values US dollars, millions in 20, US dollars in millions. If we go to the end, then we can see the value. So the value here, if we, convert it with a unit multiplier, I think it's 589. So if that's right, Yuri, that's what he said. So you can see it's got quite low values. So yeah, it's microdata. We can scroll up and down this table, see all the microdata for this aggregate, and then we can go back. And we can see at the top as well, so this table is showing 190 data points for what we click through. Anything else to show there? Yeah, we can download the data, things like that. But so that's the second data set, and it works with the same mechanism, same kind of structural metadata. So let's talk a bit about the mechanism, how this works. So going to get a little bit technical, but it's not very long because there's not a lot in the mechanism to make it work. So first of all, you need a DSD to store both the aggregates and the microdata, to show the relationships between them. You need 2 additional dimensions. You need an uncoded dimension, which serves as a unique identifier for the microdata. Otherwise you'll run into like many duplicates. And this would normally be something like a GUID. It will be an uncoded dimension. And then a coded dimension, which just indicates whether the data point is an aggregation or a microdata. Aggregations are usually set to total, microdata are set to DD. DD, not MD, because this serves for less disaggregated data as well. We just set it, we say like drill down. And then you also need a code list with the items for the coded dimension that I've just talked about, and that's just like, underscore T total and microdata, DD, or drill down. And then second part of the mechanism, annotations. So you need an annotation drill down. This just points to the dimension where you say whether the data point is aggregated or disaggregated. So drill down just says like DD dim. Usually that's what we call the drill down dimension, but you could call it something else. And then the default annotation. The default annotation, you just set it to first show the aggregated data layer. Okay, so it says when it comes to this data flow, you show the data points where the DD dim dimension is total, which like hides where it only shows the aggregated data for now. And then the not displayed annotation, this is used to hide the kind of technical drill down and unique identifier dimensions, because you just don't need to show them, right? They're used to drive the mechanism and they're not used for presentation. And then there's this other drill down concepts annotation, and that just lists the concepts to display in the microdata table. Okay, so four annotations. And the really nice thing is that these are all standard annotations. Okay, when we did the compilation of the standard annotation list, this is where we defined what these actually mean. So we haven't, invented any of these just for .start. And then I guess the last part of the mechanism is what you define in the data set, when you're building your data set. So the data points, which are the microdata, basically you set the DDID to the unique identifier, you set DDDIM to DD, and then you just make sure that the dimensions which are for your used for your aggregate dimensions, they're just aligned with your microdata points. I've got an example, okay, in the next slide in case you're kind of losing the plot, but And then the aggregation data points, you just set DDID to total, DDIDIM to total, and then the microdata only dimensions, which you're not bothered about for your aggregated data points, you just set them to like, underscore T for total or underscore Z. It doesn't matter, but just be consistent, obviously. So this is what it looks like. I'm sorry if it's a bit small at the back. But so we can see the first line shows the aggregated data points, right? So here, all the dimensions are set to underscore T, meaning we don't care about them. They're like the microdata dimensions. And only the blue ones, these are the aggregate dimensions. So obs value is shown the aggregated value. And as I said, it's only the aggregate dimensions which are actually set to something. So, here Saudi Arabia, GAF, I can't remember what that means, but it's a measure and the time period. And then everything in orange are the microdata points, right? So here, like all of the dimensions are used, because the microdata dimensions, and the blue columns, they all kind of align, with the aggregates. Okay, so basically that's what a data set looks like. And yeah, so that's it for the mechanism. So just some conclusions. So this is all documented not only in this presentation, which is always helpful, but it's actually documented in the .stat suite documentation. But also, you can go to the standard annotations list as well. It tells you what the aggregations are and how they work. This is applicable to like any level of disaggregation, like not just microdata. Okay. It's quite easy to use, obviously with a bit of practice, but it works in the way that I've just described it. You just need 2 extra dimensions, a very, very simple code list, and the 4 standard annotation. And the rules in the dataset, they're really simple, okay? And Jens tells me now it's even easier because you only need like one extra dimension apparently. I don't know if you need the code list, but speak to Jens if you want to know more. Both of these data sets, they respected the modeling guidelines, so we didn't really invent any kind of new modeling techniques. And they also follow the forthcoming unit of measure guideline, which is nice. So, if you're going to do microdata like this, then you can use the unit of measure guidelines. It scales to at least like 1 billion data points in production, as we've seen with CRS. Don't know how far this will scale, but this is what we know. The custom structure definitions, which Matt talked about, they may help here and in future rather than using annotations. I don't know how, but I guess we'll see. And just like as I said, this is in production. It's been proven to work. But these are like simple microdata presentation use cases. Obviously, SDMX3, we're going to be able to do a lot more, and I'm sure like more than what we can do here, but this remains to be seen. So, how should we extend this mechanism for what's coming? Don't know, but we'll see. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Any questions? Oh, yes, many raised hands. I don't know who was first.
Thank you, David, for this presentation. It can be that I didn't understand your data, but I just don't understand why you need 2 more dimensions and 2 DSDs. If you have your microdata with a in a DSD with a reference area, you will probably also have a code for the aggregation, and then you would only need one DSD, I would expect, because then you had the aggregation on the code, and you can drill down from the serious key on whatever is on the serious key that is not the aggregated reference. But I could maybe I didn't understand the full data example.
So you don't know why we need the 2 dimensions?
Yeah, I mean, as I understood, you needed 2 DSDs.
No. What, 1 DSD?
But then I maybe even understand it less. But because if you have the ref area, right? You have the reference area.
Do you want to take it, Yuri? Okay, I think Yuri would like to actually answer on this. So.
Maybe go to the example screen.
You mean this one? This one? Okay.
Yeah. One DSD is one dimension is needed to really disambiguate the records, so that the ID, and so we have totals for aggregates and then the unique IDs for the unique IDs. That's kind of what you would expect. The other dimension is really just for filtering convenience. So if you work in .stat, we recommend this. If you have a different implementation, maybe you don't need it if you can efficiently distinguish between the microdata part and the aggregate data part. For us, this secondary dimension, it's really there to easily chop and present the aggregates for the aggregate part. And when we go into drill down mode, we kind of have to set only one filter rather than analyze the plenty IDs that distinguish or characterize the microdata. But other than that, yeah, you only need one dimension to uniquify the elements in your table. But it's a hybrid design, so you are packing your aggregate data and microdata into the same cube. And so it's just by slicing the cube, you show either the aggregate data or the contextual microdata in the context of some of the aggregate dimensions. So most of what you see in the drill down table, it's like exactly the same dimensions fixed that you saw in the original table at the cell level. They are in blue, and the rest is just attributes, mostly.
Yeah, I think the
Well,
DDD is redundant because the DDD can.
Yeah, you can, but
yeah.
the point is, how do you do it with SDMX in mind? So it's not magic. I think many data warehousing tools who allow you to do drill down, they do it roughly this way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, Jens, you say that DD-DIM is now redundant. Yeah, we can lose this, is this right? And we only need the DDID. Yeah. It's just at the time when this was created, we did need both. So.
Yes, so as Yuri said, it's not necessary anymore. It was necessary when we only had the previous version of the API, where you had to have a key for your filtering. And so we had to say, if for the display of the microdata only, we needed a feature to say, give me all the values that are not total. And we didn't have this in the API. Now we have it in the API. We haven't updated the .stat yet to the new API. But once we have the new API with the more flexible filtering mechanism, we can get rid of this column. And when indeed you only have one single dimension that you really have to have, which is the identifier of your microdata, because still when you upload your microdata, for instance, or you want to update it, you need to have a unique identifier for each of your lines. And so this is this special dimension for identifying. And you use _T for the aggregated value to differentiate it.
Okay. So,
thank you. Yeah, maybe how to say, stupid question, but would that also work for sample survey microdata, showing weights and stuff like that, or could be adapted to? Thank you.
Does someone want to take that question? I don't know.
I wouldn't know why not. You might want to define multiple measures for that. And then you need SDMX 3. But even in 2, you could do it with attributes. So the technique will work.
Okay.
The same techniques are
Please. I mean, I guess it could work, but in general, I mean, there is a bit of work in the microdata to get it in something that can fit in the structure. Like in the actual microdata that usually get the interest rate, it's not going to be from 0 to 3 years. It's going to be 18 months. And then you have a classification to put it into the coding and classification that you're going to use in the aggregations, and then you can do it. But there is at least one step of derivation of variables that are valid for the aggregate data that is a bit before this thing. But in the real use case where you collect microdata, you're going to have to encode this step first, I would say. And since I have the mic,
yeah, but Edgardo's busting to say something, so after you, Luca. So.
Maybe just the other dimension, the other components that are in like currency or interest rate. Before you said the other dimensions, they're drill down dimensions, but these can be attributes, right? There's no reason for them to be dimensions, like the interest rate, currency, fin type, or is there a reason that they're supposed to be dimensions that I don't see?
Yeah, no, I think they can be attributes here. Yeah. I should have shown the DSD here as well, but I didn't think of that.
Yeah, actually, there is a little bit more complexity. I think David mentioned it, but maybe to clarify, many of these dimensions are used still to aggregate through a hierarchy. So, for instance, I think there is a recipient. So there are donors. There are donor dimension and there is a recipient dimension, and these dimensions are fully hierarchical. You see here, for instance, this is recipients, and you see in hierarchy, and you see that there is microdata attached to Albania, but then there is also microdata attached to Europe, there is microdata attached to developing countries. These are actually all the same microdata behind. So Europe points to the microdata of Albania and of Belarus and so on, all of the other countries below. So there is an automatic mechanism to figure out something is a parent of a child in the hierarchy, and so the metadata that is retrieved is not only the metadata from that precise item in that dimension, but actually for all of the childs of this item too. So, and childs of childs. So actually it goes really down the whole hierarchy to find the microdata that is attached at the very lowest level. And this works for all of the dimensions. Sometimes it's not necessary because you have no hierarchy and it's just total. But in other cases it can be. So yeah, it's flexible.
Yeah, so if you drill down like a higher level, I think Europe here, like I did, then it shows all of the countries. But yeah, I think Edgardo's had his hand up for some time.
Yeah, thank you, David, for the presentation. For those of us that grew up in a national statistical office, talking about disclosing microdata generates a strange sensation. I'm sure that is shared by many people here, because what you have to do is exactly the opposite, not to disclose the microdata. Because if it is anonymized, it's useless, and if it's not anonymized, you are breaking the statistical secret. However, I feel that this is a very powerful feature for drilling down. Not up to the level of microdata, but to more, you mentioned that, less disaggregated levels. I mean, a typical application or typical dissemination format for surveys or censuses is something like what you are showing there, that is the hierarchy, the geographical hierarchy that you have in any country. You have the country, the total national, you have the major administrative division, and you have one or two additional levels that you can show aggregates at without disclosing without breaking the statistical secret. And yes, you can show in that way if you have the reference area as a hierarchy, and that will be seen that way. But it's also interesting to have the possibility of showing by level and opening, drilling down for the subsequent levels when you double click in the value. So instead of having all that, I would start with a line that has the total national, and then when I double click, I will open in the major administrative area, major administrative division, and then I choose one province, and I have the districts, and I choose one district, and I have the, I don't know, census enumeration district or whatever it is. Is that possible? I mean, to have more than one drill down level in the data?
At the moment, it's just one, but it still can get useful if you want to kind of simplify the initial complexity that the navigator is facing, because the one closest to your leaf node in the hierarchy, you can always delegate into the microdata or the drill down area. So the initial selection is simpler for the end user with that one level, or you can have two levels, as many levels delegated as you wish.
I can tell you,
but
in Eurostat, it's a nightmare to show our geography because we have world, regions, sub-regions, countries.
Yeah, for that it's possible.
And it would be great if we can just show numbers and let the user drill down to the specific.
Yeah. Maybe before handing over the microphone, I can just mention another use case that David didn't present, but we kind of we used it in a couple of scenarios. We have policy questionnaires where we run simple surveys with not really confidential respondent level data, and so we present the aggregate results of the questionnaire with some very simple aggregation, but then give the microdata feature to actually go and see which country responded what and how the questionnaire results came up.
Yes, thank you, David, and I like it. This kind of feature from user point of view, because we receive sometimes the question about data lineage, and at least here it gives a kind of part from where this value was, or how it's calculated. But before asking my question, just to verify that this value is added, is not calculated by the system, right? I mean, the aggregation to arrive from micro to from.
Yeah, so this is static data.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is
so
pre-aggregated. Yeah.
Pre-calculated. And what I hear, this is will, how to say, maybe in terms of question from data manager point of view about the cost, because when you have to add a line, you have to add micro values and macro values, and also impact in terms of performance. So my suggestion or question as a suggestion, maybe in the future, if it is possible to have the possibility to make calculations, the system can make the calculation, we can transform the business from micro to micro, how to say it, and then the user can go from, like Edgardo explained it, I can give the example or use case of trade, a very useful trade for NSO point of view, because they have, how to say, HS commodity, 8-digit, 6-digit, 4-digit, 2-digit. And then sometimes countries they produce, and you can give only at lowest level, and the system will make calculation, and it will be very useful. Thank you.
Okay, well, so the suggestion is to have some dynamic aggregations going on. Yeah, okay. Jens?
Yeah, very quick to respond to this. Indeed, so we had an organizational decision to not do dynamic calculations directly in the dissemination system. We wanted that it's the data producers who really do these calculations and take the responsibility for mistakes. It has a huge impact indeed, because actually what happens, especially in this data set, is the aggregated data outweighs in the size much more than microdata. So the microdata here represents, I don't know, maybe even not 5%, even less. Maybe 1% of the data is microdata, and there's a huge amount of aggregations, because there are so many levels, so many dimensions where all these aggregates are calculated. So it's each time you have to multiply. So it's huge.
Yeah.
And so they manage this in the production system, and it takes quite a while to upload it. So yeah, there's disadvantage in doing this, but there was a reason to not do this. But maybe other organizations would go another path. I don't know. There's an
so apparently in this data set, I mean, it's like 1 billion data points, but like only 12 million are microdata. The rest are aggregations. So.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. I know that what you're showing on the screen is still time series representation. Are there any restrictions on how you can pivot these data sets, or you can treat it just like any other aggregated data set? This is one, and second, it's more conceptual. Well, I suppose that actually Jens has already answered it, because the question was, how would you treat inconsistencies across time, which are quite possible. But I think Jens already answered it, that it's the data product provider's responsibility. But the pivoting, yes, if you could answer.
So the question on the pivoting, the pivoting?
Are there any restrictions or any particularities?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't know if I should demo something, but we can have a look later on. Yeah. Sorry, I know Tony, you want to ask a question at the back, but just here first. Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks. My question was, you said in one of the slides that you need to have this .stat core data warehouse, something like that. So I'm wondering everything what you showed is super cool, but I guess has to be stored in a way that .stat can read it. So does it mean that the database or data warehouse or data mart, whatever, has to have a specific, I guess, SDMX modeling, or
no,
or you can read whatever data mart?
I mean,
can you?
Yes. I mean, for the data model, as I said in the structure, you need the DSD to store the aggregates and the microdata, and you need these. I think now you just need like one additional dimension, okay, and you need these annotations like in your structure. And those are the kind of extra bits that you need to like a normal DSD. But does this answer your question though? I mean, sorry.
Actually, I mean, you're referring to DSDs, but let's say my data warehouse does not know anything about DSDs. It just is like star schema, and so I want to use .stat to represent my data mart. Is that possible, or do I need to adapt it first?
Yeah. You need to adapt it. I mean, you need to adapt it to SDMX. I mean,
okay, and that has to have something specific, like what you call it, like .stat core, or
.stat core is just the database. It's like the data warehouse part of .stat. So we need to transfer it there first before if you're going to use this. Yeah.
I would say what you need is an SDMX API that exposes your data.
Yeah.
And it can be any SDMX implementation of the API. It doesn't need to be .stat core. It can be maybe a Fusion registry, if you know that. So there's a commercial version that has data. Maybe there are other implementations. There's actually SDMX AI, that is the development from Eurostat, that allows to expose your dissemination database through an SDMX interface, so SDMX API. So, for instance, SDMX AI could be a solution for you to plug when the data explorer on top of your SDMX web service, SDMX AI.
Yeah, because I meant like the other way around. So if you're going to put it in .stat, then this is the mechanism that you need to use. But yeah, you can use this mechanism. Is kind of as long as it's like a SDMX native data warehouse, then it's platform independent. So, yeah. So is this Tony at the back, right at the back?
Okay.
Yes, okay, thanks. So my question is about .stat and workflow. You said we need to add the hyperlink to the annotation.
It's automatically generated, so if you have this mechanism,
right,
and if you have the data loaded, in the way that I showed, which links the the aggregates to the microdata, then the hyperlinks are kind of generated.
It's generated automatically. Okay, thanks.
Maybe two last questions.
I just want to add a small clarification for the first case that David presented. It's actually for the Debt Transparency Initiative, we have a full pipeline where we have a questionnaire generated by the matrix generator. It's kind of a hidden little feature of the matrix generator, which gets all the microdata. And then we do computations with various .stat cores in the backend, and we gradually transform the data model into this drill-down data model. Yeah. And sometimes we pad out the microdata. So I warned David not to show the more complicated aggregation use case, where we show the outstanding debt amount, because for that we do forecasts for the outstanding debt, and for every future year we re-represent the microdata that is still valid according to the contracts that are in that. So you can do really complex aggregations, and maybe that's why it's not necessarily obvious to put this load into the data explorer or into the data warehouse component. If you really want to do nice aggregations, that's a task that you would do in your production process and try to deliver the data at the end as efficiently as you can.
Yeah. Yeah, so just to show on screen, it's because this feature was developed in the matrix generator for debt transparency, right? So for the countries to, or for the banks to report the transactions, the DSD was designed. Okay, and it's exactly the same DSD which is used to present the data in the data explorer. And so in the matrix generator, you just say, what your data flow is, that you want the reporting template for. You click that button, and then it will create an Excel reporting template. Then you can send that to the reporter. I mean, it's very, very simple. It's just like a two-dimensional reporting template, just like X and Y axis, but for debt transparency it worked really well. So you can use it for other things, if you want to try.
Okay, I've seen two raised hands over there, and maybe we close.
So aggregation, it works for. It sums the value. You can. It's for volume, but if you have an index or something like this, it will not work. You cannot put a weight for individuals to have an average, weighted average as a. If you sum the microdata to another level, it's just for. It sums the individual values. The ops value should be. Or it can be an average.
The ops value can be whatever you want. I mean, it's pre-calculated. So yeah, so by the time the data explorer is showing it, it kind of doesn't care what the operation was. It's just a value that was pre-calculated. Okay. Yeah.
In SDMX 2.1, what we do is we have attributes that have numerical value definitions, and so you just say, I have a weight attribute, sampling weight or aggregation weight, you decide. You can have both. and you pad out your microdata as much as you need to prepare it for aggregation.
And maybe the last question over there.
I was thinking whether, do you have a mechanism to control, I mean, to block the drill down to disaggregate values that are restricted? I mean, for instance, let's say you have the scenario that when you disaggregate, like one of the member, let's say, disaggregated row or, I don't know, measure is restricted, right? When you disaggregate it, you can calculate by, for instance, if it's a sum, you can, you can calculate the restricted value. Do you have a mechanism, or you don't, you don't care for this? You don't have those scenarios in your production system?
To what, to hide the value if it's confidential?
To block the drill down when there is a scenario when the disaggregated value is somehow restricted, can be derived from the rest of from the total and the rest of the values.
No, I don't think so. I think as far as we go, if the value is confidential, we don't show it. Is that right, Jens? I think that's as far as we go. But there's no kind of drill down blocking value. I guess what you do is just like not put the value in there, and you can't drill down. So, yeah. 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 But yeah, we just do have this thing where if it's marked as confidential with confidentiality status, then we hide the value. But that's exactly the same in kind of non-disaggregated values as well. Marathon question session. Actually, got a chair.
That's the record number. Yeah. So maybe I would just like to invite all the speakers for any remaining questions you may have. If not, we will just conclude. Please don't be shy, Holger and Mayan. So.
Now we've got to sit there as well.
And Edgardo, of course. So, do you have any other questions or questions that you couldn't ask? Not for David, please. I think he's exhausted. No other. Oh, there is a question. Luca.
So in 2 years, we're going to have another experts meeting, most likely, experts workshop. And there's probably going to be another session on microdata. You have 2 years, it's fine. I don't know, I have a general question. What would you like in 2 years the session on microdata to show, right? I mean, you showed now the initiative, the gaps, an interesting implementation from the OECD, ongoing efforts in the Bank of Israel. What would you like to be able to present, let's say, in 2 years? Kind of, I have an objective or a timeline for some of these things, basically, looking forward.
I mean, I'm not looking at Bilyana because I don't have our timeline in the head, but yes, I want to show our results, right, of what we discussed today. So to show different use cases. I mean, David showed now one that is actually in production, which is rather impressive and really cool, and even in 2.1 actually. But to look at these things with 3.0, with real use cases in place, that our working group has finished modeling. We present together with Edgardo that we have solved all the problems, and then we'll have a big party and we'll find out that SDMX works for any data, and that's what we cannot show today yet. We can talk about it, but we cannot show it yet, and I think there's a lot we will be able to show at that time when SDMX3 is actually being in production and being used by several of the organizations that are sitting here in the room.
I don't know if in 2 years would be possible, but one day it should be possible to have the whole data processing life cycle of a typical statistical operation, starting from the data collection up to the data dissemination, data collection, of course, of microdata, up to the data dissemination of aggregate data and nice visualizations, all done in SDMX. From collecting the data, put it in SDMX, using VTL for automated validation and imputation, and then taking the data using VTL to do the aggregation and calculate the different indicators, and then use DataSuite, IstatKit, or whatever is coming for visualization, and also AI for generating rich text reports. I mean, we are not far from that. Well, a bit far, but we have a lot of dots in this path already. We need to connect them. But the good thing is that anything that I said is strange to the audience, because we have been talking about that. So for me, it's a matter of working and having better ideas.
Yeah, I guess. Well, next time I hope that we're just discussing like the corner cases, right? You know, rather than the what's the opposite of a corner case? Is the center of the room cases. Because yeah, I think it seems as though we've still got a long way to go in terms of implementation for microdata, but we've obviously made a good start. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and hopefully a first version of the concept-oriented guideline at some point next year. I think Edgardo summarized quite well. I don't know what I can add more, but we're coming to the end of this session, and I would just like to highlight to you the key themes that we explored, and I'm sure you spoke a lot about many of those also over the past days, but yeah. One important topic was discussed by Daniel, what is microdata? And he told us any data, just model it. But it seems to be a challenge, right? Today we mainly highlighted modeling challenges, implementation gaps, quite on the pessimistic side. But I think it's important to pose and emphasize that SDMX 3.x brings opportunities, and I think Old Gert showed us quickly as well some of the work that was done at the international stage. More flexible modeling, efficient data integration, reporting, enhanced sharing, etc. There were few very important topics, at least to me, that emerged today on linking data, integration, and importantly, reconciliation of micro and macro data. We also saw the need for a user-centric approach, connecting the data to the users, and Mayan also spoke about it. And in closing, I would like to thank you all for your contributions and for sharing your expertise with everyone in the audience. I think your insights have provided a deeper understanding of the opportunities and of the challenges that we all face with SDMX, and more importantly with SDMX for microdata. I would also like to thank all of you for your active participation and engagement throughout the session, for providing Edgardo with homework and a lot of important feedback today. And I would like to emphasize what Daniel mentioned earlier today, the need for collaborative and community effort to tackle many of those challenges, not just across organizations, not only within the SDMX community, but potentially also across initiatives. And Olga spoke about the International Data Gap Initiative, which is really important to advance the use of SDMX for microdata and probably more broadly the use of SDMX. And looking ahead, I think the work, as you've seen, is not done. We'll have to continue working on microdata. There is ongoing work being done and on the new concept-oriented guidelines, and will continue. So I really encourage you to stay involved in those efforts, to get in touch with us, share your use cases, share your feedback as well, challenges. and bring today's insights back to your organizations. Thank you very much for joining our session, and I wish you a pleasant and nice evening in Amsterdam. Have a good evening.
Well, I don't have too much of an organizational announcement to make now, but you have a question, Jens? Okay.
Yes, thank you. My question is linked to what Abdullah said earlier about the business case of OECD. Just an additional one. I saw many presentations, all very nice, but they were made with a template that had a logo that didn't look like the SDMX logo. So my question is linked to communication. Having a strong image is quite important. Having a clear communication is important. And so maybe there could be something on providing logos, images, so that we can reuse them in a harmonized way, and so that we don't need to invent. Because for myself, sometimes I was looking for SDMX logo, and I picked up something from the internet. It's maybe not the best quality, and so on. And so maybe this could be something for the future.
You're talking about the presentation template.
Yeah, the template.
Yes,
yes. Presentation template, yes.
Which, you're right, indeed, we had reused the presentation template that was offered to a previous experts workshop, and I'm looking now at the logo. It's close, but not exactly the one. This one is the correct one. This one is the official one, absolutely. But indeed, for the template, for the presentation template, we did not double check, and you're right, it wasn't exactly the right logo. That's a good point.
Maybe Jens, just as a quick answer, a few months ago, from a secretariat perspective, we were also looking for the original, couldn't find it, and we actually, one of our designers created a vector image. And I think I put it in an EBIS folder, in the secretariat EBIS folder, maybe. Or if somebody else has a better location where we're directly on the front page, no? And then you download it from there. That shouldn't be a problem, yeah? Or Stratos?
It's just to put all the resources on GitHub.
Yeah, that was my other thought.
Yeah,
but maybe you put it in several locations, because with the web integration, probably you need different resolutions and so on. So you put it in GitHub, in EBIS, and then also on the front page.
No, I must say that I forget a bit, but I remember that image. It wasn't very. Some parts of the shapes were a bit weird, so I think we slightly corrected it. But okay, we can. It's a good point, indeed. There needs to be an official logo available to anyone who wants to make official material. This was the last session of the main workshop. As you know, the main workshop ends today. Tomorrow you have side meetings for those of you who are involved in side meetings. Tomorrow you also have the capacity building for those of you who stay, also for the capacity building. I know many of you will be leaving tonight. So since I have you all here, I would like to, first of all, thank some of the colleagues who made this possible. I would like to thank the people from the venue who served us good food throughout these days. I would like to thank our technicians. Yeah, bravi! I would like to thank our contractors from Adria Congrex, who took care of the logistical organization here in Amsterdam. I would like to thank, obviously, the organizing committee. And actually, maybe we need to take another quick picture, maybe, of just the organizing committee members. That would be nice. And most of all, I would like to thank all of you as chairs who chaired the meetings, keeping time perfectly, and will provide great reports on the outcomes of their sessions, I'm sure, so thank you for that already. Thanking the presenters for taking the time to present, and thanking all of you participants for being here, being very engaged. There was a high amount of questions, and that was great. Sometimes we get the question, what is the difference between the global conference and the experts workshop? And I have the feeling that this was really an experts workshop. There were lots of questions, detailed questions. We were able to go in real detail in some topics. So basically, that's it. I look forward to seeing many of you tomorrow in the side meetings and in the capacity building. And I would also like to remind you also to keep in touch. There will be a workshop organized by the UNEC in Geneva on the 21st and 22nd of October, so in a couple of weeks. It's the Modern Stats World workshop. I know some of you will be there, so maybe it's a chance to keep the discussions going. And I've been informed that there's still places available. So if you have nothing to do in 2 weeks' time and you would like to be in Geneva, they'll be happy to have you there. All right, that's it for now.